The man who took everything from my family. Our house. My father's name. The life we were supposed to have. Sat 3 rows behind us in church that Sunday. And my mother turned around, and she waved him over to sit with us. I was 9 years old. I remember gripping the wooden pew so hard, my knuckles went white. I didn't understand what she was doing. If I'm honest, I hated her a little for it that morning. It took me 31 years, and a child of my own falling asleep on my chest, to finally understand what my mother knew that day. And it changed the way I raise my kids now. This isn't a story about money, even though money is how it started. It's about the one thing nobody teaches you in school: what to do with the people who break you. Now let me be honest with you before we go further. My mother was not a saint. She was tired. She was broke. She cried in the bathroom where she thought we couldn't hear. So this isn't a lesson about being perfect. It's about 3 things I wish someone had told me sooner. How a single handshake cost us the only home I'd ever known. Why my mother chose to forgive the man who did it. And what forgiveness actually protects. Because it is not what you think. Stay with me to the end. Because the sentence she said to that man on the church steps is the same sentence I whispered to myself the night I almost lost my own family the same way. My father was a good man with rough hands and a soft heart. He built porches, framed houses, poured concrete driveways all over our county. His business partner, I'll call him Raymond, because the man is long gone, and this story isn't about naming him, was his best friend since high school. They didn't have contracts between them. They had a handshake. In our town, back then, a handshake was supposed to mean something. One spring, Raymond found the deal of a lifetime. A big development contract. More money than my father had ever seen. But it needed cash up front. More than they had. So Raymond brought papers to our kitchen table. And my father, who left school at 16, signed them without reading every line. He put our house up as collateral for the loan. He trusted the handshake more than the paper. I remember that night only because my parents were laughing. My mother made a pie. They talked about a future that felt, for one evening, completely safe. My mother kept the books for the business. She told me years later she'd felt something was wrong that spring. A number that didn't sit right. But she trusted the handshake too. Because you're supposed to trust the people you love. By autumn, Raymond was gone. The money was gone. The contract fell apart. And somewhere in all those pages my father never read, every dollar of the debt landed on him alone. 3 days before Christmas, a letter came from the bank. I didn't understand the word foreclosure then. I only understood my father sitting on the back steps in the cold, not moving, for a very long time. We lost the house by spring. We moved into half of a rented duplex on the other side of town, with a kitchen so small only one person could stand in it. The day the men came to change the locks, my mother didn't cry in front of them. She handed me a cardboard box and told me to pack my books first, because a person who still has their books still has a future. I've never forgotten that. And here is the first thing I want you to take from my family's mistake. Not the lesson everyone expects. Yes, read what you sign. Get it in writing. Never let a friendship stand in the place of a clear, honest agreement, especially where your home is involved. That part matters. But that lesson would not have saved us from what came next. Because the house wasn't the only thing we almost lost. My father changed after that. The laughter left him first. Then the talking. He'd sit in the dark with the television off, and some nights the anger came out sideways at all of us. There was a night my father threw his plate against the wall over nothing. A spilled glass of milk. I remember my mother quietly wiping it up, and I remember thinking the anger had moved into our house and paid for a room. And I learned to hate Raymond the way only a child can. Completely and with all my heart. I built that hatred like a fort. It felt like loyalty. It felt like the only thing I could do for my father. So imagine what went through me 2 years later when I saw that man walk into our church. Older. Smaller than I remembered. Alone. And my mother turned around in the pew, and she smiled at him. And she waved him over to sit with us. With us. After the service, I couldn't hold it in. I asked her, with tears in my eyes, how she could let him sit there. How she could smile at the man who took everything. The whole town had opinions. Some told my mother she was a fool for ever speaking to Raymond again. In our county, holding a grudge was practically a family value. She let them talk. She knelt down to my level, right there on the church steps, and she said something I did not understand for 31 years. She said, "Baby, we already lost the house. I am not going to lose my peace too. Hate is a tenant that never pays rent. But it never, ever leaves." I thought she was weak. I thought forgiving him meant saying that what he did was okay. I was a child. I had it exactly backwards. Because my mother never called it okay. She never got the money back. She never even got an apology worth the name. What she refused to do was let his one bad act live rent-free in her chest for the rest of her life. And raise her children inside a house made of that poison. I grew up. I moved away. I did all the practical things right. I read every contract twice. I kept business and family separate. I never signed a paper I didn't understand. My mother's hard lesson stuck. But the deeper lesson? I didn't learn that one until the night my own son was cheated by someone he trusted and came home with his shoulders shaking. And I felt it rise up in me. That same old fire, 30 years later. I wanted to burn the world down for my boy. I finally understood exactly how my father had felt. I sat up that whole night. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, holding my sleeping daughter, I finally heard my mother's voice on those church steps. The forgiveness was never for Raymond. Raymond never knew, never cared, never changed. The forgiveness was for us. It was the only door out of the dark room my father chose to live in. I used to watch her forgive smaller things too. A rude cashier, a neighbor who never returned a favor. She'd just breathe and let it go, like setting down a bag she'd carried too far. My father stayed angry until the day he died. He was right about what happened to him. Dead right. And being right cost him every good year he had left. My mother was wronged just as badly. But she chose to put it down. And she lived light. And she laughed again. And her grandchildren remember her singing in that tiny kitchen. And here's what nobody tells you about becoming a parent. Your children don't inherit your bank account nearly as much as they inherit your reactions. They learn love, or they learn resentment, at your kitchen table. So I made my choice that night, for my own children. I taught my son the practical wisdom. Get it in writing. Protect what's yours. Learn from the wound. But I also taught him the harder wisdom my mother paid for. You can hold someone accountable without letting them own your heart. You forgive not because they earned it, but because your children are watching what you carry. So here is everything my family lost a house to learn. First, protect your family in the daylight. Read the papers. Keep the promises clear. Never trade your home for a handshake. Second, hate feels like loyalty, but it is a tenant that ruins the house from the inside. Being right is not the same as being free. And third, the way you carry your worst day is the inheritance you leave your children. Long after the money, and the house, and even the anger are gone. My mother stood on those church steps with nothing left, and she said, "We already lost the house. I'm not going to lose my peace too." It took me 31 years to become rich enough to understand her. If you're carrying something heavy towards someone who wronged you, I'm not going to tell you it was okay. It wasn't. But ask yourself, who's really paying the rent on that anger? The next story I want to tell you is about a father and a son who didn't speak for 5 years. And the voicemail that finally brought that boy home, which didn't come from the father at all. But that one's for next time. Tell me in the comments. One thing your parents or grandparents forgave that you only understood much later. I read every single one. And if this story found you at the right time, stay a while. There's a seat here for you.